Most people spend 40 years building a sandcastle only to watch the tide of retirement wash it away. But what if I told you the tide is actually your greatest power source? Intro. Today, we are shattering the myth that retirement is a finish line and revealing the mechanical blueprint for doubling your net worth when everyone else is slowing down. The tragedy of modern finance is this sunset theory. This is the psychological trap where you are taught to spend your life accumulating a nest egg, only to spend your golden years watching that egg shrink until there is nothing left but shells. It's a defensive, fear-based strategy that actually guarantees your wealth will decay. But the top 1% of retirees don't play defense. They understand the multiplier effect. They realize that at age 60 or 65, you possess a combination of assets that you didn't have in your 20s. Peak capital, maximum tax advantage status, and the rarest commodity of all, total temporal control. When you stop trading time for a paycheck, your money finally loses its shackles. The reason most people fail to grow their wealth after 60 is not because of market volatility. It's because they switch from a growth engine to a drainage pipe. They stop seeing their portfolio as a living organism and start seeing it as a grocery fund. To double your net worth in this phase, you must first perform a radical mental audit. You are no longer a saver. You are now a chief investment officer of your own private equity firm. The shift from, "I need this to last," to "how do I scale this foundation," is the invisible line between those who outlive their money and those whose money outlives their wildest dreams. By treating retirement as a multiplier rather than a subtraction, you unlock mathematical advantages that the working class simply cannot access because they are too busy trading their hours for survival. The second pillar of doubling your net worth involves a concept the banking elite use daily, yet the average retiree ignores: the velocity of capital. In your working years, your money was likely stagnant, sitting in a retirement account, moving at a snail's pace while you focused on your salary. But to achieve a multiplier effect, your money must move. Static wealth is dying wealth. When you enter the multiplier phase, you have to stop thinking about your balance and start thinking about your flow. The secret that high net worth individuals use to accelerate their growth is the strategic repositioning of dormant assets. Think about the equity in your home, the cash value in overfunded policies, or the conservative bonds that are barely beating inflation. These are lazy assets. While they feel safe, they are actually the primary reason your net worth plateaus. To double your wealth, you must increase the speed at which your dollars work for you. This doesn't mean gambling on high-risk penny stocks. It means moving from safe and slow to calculated and constant. Imagine your wealth as a river. If the water stops moving, it becomes a stagnant pond. If it flows with purpose, it can power a whole city. Most retirees are taught to park their money in low-yield protection vehicles, but the math proves that a slightly higher velocity, moving capital into cash-flowing real estate or private credit markets, can turn $1 million portfolio into $2 million in less than a decade. This is where the rich win. They don't let their money rest just because they are resting. They ensure that every single dollar is on a mission. By optimizing your asset location and ensuring your capital never sits idle, you create a self-sustaining cycle where the growth begins to outpace your lifestyle expenses, creating an upward spiral of exponential accumulation that most people think is impossible at this age. While most people focus on how much they earn, the wealthy focus on how much they actually keep. The third stage of the multiplier effect is mastering the tax alpha strategy. In your 60s, the government becomes your most aggressive silent partner, waiting to take a massive bite out of your traditional retirement accounts through required minimum distributions and income taxes. However, this is also the exact moment you can use the tax code to your advantage to create a massive wealth surge. To double your net worth, you must transition from a taxable environment to a tax-free or tax-deferred sanctuary. This is where the conversion strategy comes into play. By strategically moving assets from traditional buckets into Roth vehicles or utilizing specialized trusts, you are essentially buying out the government's share of your future growth. Imagine your portfolio grows by 7%. If you are in a 25% tax bracket, your real growth is stunted. But if that growth happens in a tax-sheltered environment, the compounding effect is turbocharged. It is the difference between a snowball rolling down a hill with a headwind versus one rolling in a vacuum. Furthermore, The rich utilize step-up, basis rules, and charitable remainder trusts to ensure that their capital gains don't become a liability. They treat taxes not as an inevitability, but as a variable that can be managed and minimized through precise timing. By lowering your lifetime tax liability, you effectively increase your internal rate of return without taking on a single ounce of extra market risk. This invisible return is often the deciding factor in whether a portfolio doubles or merely survives. You aren't just managing money, you are protecting the integrity of your compound interest engine. When you stop losing 20 to 30% of your momentum to the IRS, your wealth begins to climb an exponential curve that feels like magic, but is actually just superior math. The fourth stage of the multiplier effect is the most overlooked asset in your entire portfolio: your intellectual equity. For 4 decades, you have accumulated a library of specialized knowledge, industry connections, and high-level problem-solving skills that have a market value far higher than your hourly rate ever was. The mistake most retirees make is turning off their brain the moment they receive their last paycheck. They take all that high-value experience and let it sit on a shelf while they play golf. To double your net worth, you must learn to productize your wisdom. This isn't about getting another job. It's about shifting from labor to leverage. The wealthiest retirees often see their biggest net worth spikes in their 60s because they transition into high-ticket consulting, board advisory roles, or strategic partnerships where they trade their vision instead of their time. By spending just 5 hours a week directing a project rather than 40 hours executing it, you create a new stream of high-margin income that can be funneled directly into your growth engine. This active passive income acts as a shield, allowing your core investments to remain untouched and compounding at their maximum rate. When you don't have to sell your assets to pay for your lifestyle, your portfolio becomes a runaway train of wealth. Your professional network is a goldmine of opportunities: early-stage investments, joint ventures, and insider knowledge that the general public cannot access. The multiplier here is the realization that your mind is the ultimate printing press. When you combine your capital with your deep-rooted expertise, you stop being a passive observer of the market and start becoming a participant in high-value wealth creation. This is how the rich stay rich. They never stop being valuable. They just stop being busy. The fifth stage of doubling your wealth requires a fundamental shift in how you perceive risk. In the traditional financial world, age is equated with fragility. You are told to move your money into safe bonds and cash equivalents because you don't have time to recover from a market dip. This is the most expensive advice you will ever receive. It is based on the false assumption that your time horizon ends the day you stop working. In reality, a 60-year-old today may have a 30-year investment horizon ahead of them. This is where the elite use time arbitrage to outpace the masses. When you have successfully built a foundational layer of security, your excess capital can be deployed into asymmetric risk opportunities, investments where the downside is capped, but the upside is a 5-fold or 10-fold return. While the average person is terrified of a 10% market correction, the multiplier-focused retiree is looking for value gaps. They use their stability to buy assets when others are forced to sell. They invest in private equity, specialized real estate syndications, or disruptive technologies that have long-term growth trajectories. Because they aren't panicked about next month's rent, they can afford to be patient. This patience is a superpower that generates a risk premium. The market essentially pays you a massive bonus for being the calmest person in the room. To double your net worth, you must stop trying to avoid volatility and start trying to harvest it. By maintaining a barbell strategy, having ultra-safe liquid assets on one side and high-growth aggressive assets on the other, you eliminate the middle ground where wealth goes to die. This allows you to capture the massive gains of the growth sector while your lifestyle remains completely insulated. You aren't gambling. You are strategically placing bets where the math is heavily in your favor, using your seniority as a shield. The sixth stage of the multiplier effect is the most difficult to master because it requires a complete rewiring of your survival instinct. Human beings are biologically programmed to hoard resources when they sense a transition, which is why most retirees instinctively shrink their world the moment they stop receiving a salary. They start looking for discounts, cutting expenses, and living in a state of perpetual contraction. This scarcity loop is a psychological poison that kills the multiplier effect. To double your net worth, you must adopt the abundance architecture. This is the realization that your wealth is not a finite pool of water, but a sophisticated irrigation system. When you live in fear of your portfolio dropping, you make emotional decisions, selling at the bottom, missing the recovery, and avoiding the very assets that could have doubled your fortune. The top 1% understand that the biggest risk in retirement isn't a market crash. It's the erosion of purchasing power due to inflation and a lack of growth. To combat this, you must treat your portfolio as a business that is always in expansion. This means maintaining the discipline to reinvest a portion of your gains even when you don't need to. It means staying curious about new markets and emerging asset classes instead of retreating into the familiar. When you stop worrying about running out and start focusing on scaling up, your brain begins to spot opportunities that were previously invisible. You start seeing how a strategic acquisition or a well-timed investment can move the needle more in 1 year than a decade of savings did in your 30s. This is the stage where wealth becomes a game of strategy rather than a struggle for survival. By mastering your internal narrative and refusing to participate in the culture of decline, you maintain the aggressive posture necessary to ride the waves of compound interest into a 9-figure or multi-7-figure legacy. The seventh and final stage of doubling your net worth is the creation of the legacy engine. This is where your financial journey transcends personal consumption and enters the realm of institutional-level wealth building. To achieve the final doubling of your assets, you must shift your perspective from a lifetime horizon to a multi-generational horizon. When you invest for 100 years instead of 20, your risk tolerance and your decision-making framework undergo a radical transformation. The wealthiest families on earth don't just leave money to their heirs. They build structures, family offices, private foundations, and dynasty trusts that treat the family wealth as a permanent investment fund. By shifting your assets into these structures, you create a legal and financial fortress that protects your capital from estate taxes, litigation, and the shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves phenomenon that destroys most family fortunes. This final surge happens because you have successfully removed the burn rate from your primary growth engine. When your lifestyle is fully funded by a fraction of your cash flow, the remaining surplus begins to compound with a ferocity you've never experienced before. This is the endgame of the multiplier effect, the moment where the growth of your assets becomes so aggressive that it is mathematically impossible for you to spend it fast enough. You have moved beyond the retirement game and entered the empire game. You are no longer just a retiree. You are the architect of a financial lineage. By following this 7-part blueprint, from shifting your mindset and increasing capital velocity to mastering tax alpha and leveraging your intellectual equity, you have turned the traditional retirement model on its head. You haven't just survived your golden years. You have used them as a springboard to achieve a level of wealth that most people think requires a lifetime of labor. Remember, the finish line was a lie. This is just the beginning of your most profitable decade. The multiplier is in your hands. Now, let the numbers do the work.